like, where's Tina?
Okay, first All right, we're live. Just does it look like we're live?
I have to update my app. It wouldn't let me open
We all have to update our apps. Okay.
it.
Well,
Wouldn't let me open it.
if we are live, hello everyone. Welcome to, I guess this is a data science town hall with a bunch of people in the Bright Data House for this week. We're going to talk a little bit about the state of data science. We're going to also talk a little bit about just IDEs in general, and what people's experience has been with those, and what people look for in an IDE. I would definitely like to mention that this town hall is brought to you by DeepNote. So DeepNote is a collaborative data notebook where data science and analytics teams turn to answer tough questions, collaborate from the convenience of a browser, and with features for synchronous coding, commenting, and version control. Work your way so you can work your way, connect to any data source, and code with Python, SQL, or both together. And you can share results with stakeholders by simply sending a link. So again, on that note, I think it would be really cool to just start with talking about what each of us looks for in an IDE, kind of based on your work. So we have data scientists, people more on the data analyst side, data engineers, MLOps engineers, kind of a lot of breadth in terms of the roles and the skill sets. Does that trickle down to the tools that you use and what you look for in those tools? So Alex, you have the actual microphone. Why don't we just check and see what you're looking for in that space?
I hope this is working.
We're going to find out.
But
does anyone have it open to see?
Yeah, we're live.
We're good?
I think
Okay.
people can hear us.
All right, cool.
Few.
I mean, for an IDE, one of the biggest things that I found is I need something, besides just a good user interface and stuff like that. Like, integrations are one of the toughest things to get right in an IDE, and I've tried out a lot of ones that have just terrible integrations, or they don't work properly, or they, just things happen. So integrations for me are super important, just in terms of getting the access to the data. I mean, that's super, super important. So I would say that's like the number one thing that I have issues with, that I look for in like an IDD when I'm looking at it. I'm looking for something that has good integrations. Mark, what about you?
Yeah, thanks for passing over. I'm thinking about my three main workflows. I'm a senior data scientist, and I use R, Python, SQL. And so my workflows really center around that. And so our studio can't be beat, in my opinion, for doing like statistics and analytics, specifically because they have the window panes next to it, so I can work and iterate really quickly. But then if I'm doing more Python workflows, I absolutely love VS Code for my workflows because it has like those integrations to those apps, but more specifically, it's easy to get spell check in there. And why that's so important is like spell check. Why is your coding? Why? A lot of times for your code, it's more often read than compiled. And in addition, especially in data science, especially when I'm trying to like add all this extra business logic for the company I'm in, being able to clearly describe what's going on and make that very easy for others to understand, that spell check makes it a lot easier and makes it look a lot more professional. And then finally on the SQL side, I'm at a GCP company, so I'm actually a big fan of BigQuery. And how their interface is, and for my workflow, I can split tabs and how to easily navigate kind of our data for that. And so it just really depended on what's the work I'm doing for the time and how can I quickly iterate faster to make something clear. And I'm open to any other new tools too as well that can help make that go faster for me.
Amazing. Let's get some thoughts from maybe someone on the data engineering side. We have multiple legends of data engineering on this back row here. So,
hey, I'm Zach. I'm a staff data engineer, and I think for IDEs, I think one of the big things that I really like is it's got to have column selection mode, right? Where you can like not just select rows, but you can select down, because like for refactoring, that is like so important. And like being able to do nice like find and replaces across like multiple projects, and being able to kind of manage like the import statements and being able to clean up tech debt and stuff like that. Like, in my experience, the IDE in that bucket that works the best is IntelliJ. I like the JetBrains projects, even though IntelliJ gets a bad rap sometimes, but I definitely think it's the one I like. But I mostly work in like Java, JVM languages, so it's going to be a little bit different for Python. But yeah, I'd say that's kind of like my take as a data engineer.
Awesome. Do you have any thoughts, Ben? Or Matt? Go ahead. Or Matt.
Yeah, I'll say similar things. I'm actually a big fan of the JetBrains products as well, so I tend to work more in PyCharm just because I'll be working in tools like Airflow or Prefect or something like that. And I think there's kind of a gap between IDEs that are designed for committing code that's going to like go into a Git repo versus IDEs that are more designed for interactive use. I think one maybe open product opportunities to kind of bridge that gap a little better than we have so far, because you can do notebook-like things in PyCharm, and you can commit code from other IDEs, but it's still an awkward transition, I feel like, between the two. I'll give Joe a shot. And then
My favorite's the one that will work best for what I'm trying to do. So that might be in the terminal using Vim or something. So I think it really helps to be competent in a few tools. So Vim, if you're in the console, or Emacs, I don't want to start a holy war here. But a terminal-based editor would be handy, or Nano or whatever. But then, an IDE, VS Code's pretty dope too. I think that's come a long ways. JetBrains is also amazing. I think for any JVM stuff, IntelliJ can't be beat. It is what it is. But if you're doing data science stuff, notebooks are great. DeepNote's a fantastic product. Shout out. So yeah, what about you?
I mean, I don't think it'll be too different from your answer, but yeah, I mean, I think
Excel.
yeah, Excel, favorite IDE ever. I love VBA. I love like recording macro. No, no.
Serial killer?
No. But in all seriousness, like I like things that like make testing easy. Like if I can integrate testing into whatever I'm doing, I like being able to have some sort of option in terms of like if you can like test running what data it's going to produce. I think that's always kind of nice if it gives you that option, which is somewhat dependent on what language you're using. But I think those are things. And then like Alex said, I love having integrations that are easy to kind of plug and play. That could be from like spoiled days of Facebook where like everything was like plug and play into VS Code, like everything you could ever want. It's like, oh, we built you a plugin for that. So yeah, that's kind of my feeling there.
Awesome. Mickey, what do you think from the MLOps perspective?
Yeah, I think I almost have to speak more from like a self-taught like coder engineer perspective, which is that like at the end of the day, like you are like your role as an engineer or as a data scientist or as an analyst, it's to produce some kind of asset or insight for your company or your business partner. And for me, ultimately, it's like I want a tool that, first off, I want as few tools as possible. I like to be extra in my outfits and wardrobe, not so much in my tool chain. My tool chain, I would really love it to be very, very boring and for it to work. Secondly, I want to really kind of customize it to the way like I need it to be. Like, so for example, like I still poke and peck like when I'm typing, and also like I've only, hello.
You good with audio?
Hello, testing, 1, 2, 3.
I hear you fine.
Okay. Yeah, cool. But yeah, so like I'm not like I'm not like a super experienced engineer that like, studied computer science in undergrad and like grew up with like learning my alphabet off of Vim, which someone has told me that that's what they did, or Emacs or whatever. I'm just someone who needs to kind of get the job done. So as much as I can kind of customize like my IDE to how I work and make it just really effective, and also to ideally to plug into, so for example, like I work a lot with like Docker containers. I do a lot of work in writing like tests and stuff like that for data science models. So anything that can kind of help me with that goal of just producing great outcomes and assets for my business partners is ultimately the tool that I'm going to want.
Amazing. Let's go to Forrest, our lone software engineer here, and get some thoughts here. Also, yeah, we'll do a question after. So we'll go Forrest to Avery, and then we'll take some questions.
I did arrive late. What was the question? What's your favorite IDE?
What do you look for in an IDE?
What do I look for in an
based on
IDE?
your work.
One that has the availability for me to make everything easier. Like, what I mainly use right now is VS Code because I'm mostly doing like front end stuff, and then if I do back end, I do a little like Node.js and whatnot. Everything's in VS Code. Before, when I was doing like Java back end, I actually used Eclipse, but
That's what I learned Java in.
yeah, that is what I used at first. But I've been using my most recent Java projects in IntelliJ. So, but we would always use VS Code for the front end as well, TypeScript. So TypeScript, JavaScript, everything in the front end. So for the IDE, as long as it has like just those simple little things that you don't notice that help you. That's what I enjoy. Like there's an extension, there's actually a setting in VS Code if you're writing HTML code that I think it's disabled by default for some reason, but you enable it and you're able to change the opening tag and it changes the closing tag alongside it. Makes a lot of sense, right? Unless it's a JS or JSX file, like if you're using React or something. So you have to install a plugin for that. But as long as there's some sort of solution to those little problems, those are the type of IDEs I like.
Why don't we go, Avery? I'd love to hear about your experience. So you actually, after we worked with DeepNote, you switched to their platform. Interested in like what you liked about that experience and what might make someone change from the traditional tools that you use to perhaps trying and integrating a new tool.
Yeah, for sure. I'm a big fan of DeepNote. I spend a lot of my time talking to people new to the data field, who want to become data analysts or data scientists. And for me, one of the things I value the most, especially when I'm helping these people, is just how easy is it to use and get something going. Which actually, I mean, it sounds really simple, but it can be pretty hard to set up your IDE and actually get it going. And so for people who are just breaking in, I really like DeepNote because you don't have to download a thing. You just go to a URL, which is super simple, and you have everything that you need inside of your browser, which I really enjoy. And if you've used Jupyter Notebook, really, like all DeepNote is a better version of Jupyter Notebook. And so I'm a big fan because you can at least comment, you can share it. There's like a collab. Ken and I did a whole video where we made a whole project together without really even seeing each other. We just, would talk on the DeepNote. As well as you can publish your projects, which is really big for like creating a portfolio and stuff. You can, for instance, if you do something in Jupyter Notebook, it's going to stay on your computer in some like obscure file name and like trial 1, 2, 3 and like some weird folder. But if you use DeepNote, it's already on the internet and you can send that you can publish it on LinkedIn, you can send it to recruiters. So I love that you can publish, you can do collaborations, and you don't have to install a single thing. So that's why I try to recommend DeepNote to people who have maybe used Jupyter Notebook before, or maybe haven't even used Python ever before. I think it's a good tool to use.
Awesome. I think Mark had some thoughts on what would make him change tools as well. I'd love to hear those.
Definitely. So the tools I was talking about is really for like my individual workflows, and that works great. But I recently, about a few months ago, I had 3 mentees where I was teaching them data science, and I used Colab, and it just was not working the way I wanted it to, especially for collaboration. Recently, I did a project where I reviewed one of Avery's notebooks using DeepNote, and I fell in love with the product, actually. Specifically, it was how easy it was to collaborate, and more importantly, add comments to really have communication. And so now when I'm thinking about bringing on mentees again in the future, I'm most likely going to be using DeepNote because it makes it so easy to spin it up so they can just start, have all the data available to them. And I think it's just a really great tool to like teach others. So I'm planning on doing tutorials on there more, having my mentees. And I think if you're thinking about collaboration and teaching and learning, especially in a group of people, it's been a really great experience for me.
Awesome. I think collaboration is probably front of mind with all of us here right now in the Bright Data House. That to me is like a really cool thing. And I think we often, when we're working in individual contributor roles, we lose sight of how valuable it is to be able to communicate, how valuable it is to be able to be on the same page with the people that you work with constantly. And that's something that I'm constantly looking to improve in terms of, is it via Slack? Is it via Discord? Is it via a shared notebook? Whatever it might be. And it's just exciting to be able to be here and collaborate in person where there's like the least friction between anything else. So I'm really excited that sponsors again like DeepNote, like Bright Data could make this possible. I'd love to take some questions. I'd love for people in the chat to keep asking questions. That's incredible. The first comes for data engineers. So is infrastructure as code necessary to get into data engineering? I personally have no clue what that means. So.
I would say that that's definitely an important piece of the puzzle for data engineering, especially if you're at like a smaller company. Like I think that like at the bigger like FANG companies, like that's all managed by data platform and you just write the code yourself. But being able to know how to do the deploys and the DevOpsy work that you need to do to deploy a pipeline, that stuff is super important, especially for like smaller to mid-sized companies where that's not just handed off to the platform team.
Defining infrastructure as code.
Define it. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're talking tools like Terraform, basically, where instead of going into the AWS console or using the AWS CLI to spin up components of infrastructure one at a time, so say spin up an S3 bucket, spin up an EMR cluster, you define that declaratively in the syntax, and then there's an agent basically that runs and then works toward that state. So it actually will attempt to build out the state you've created, and then of course will. Yeah. And that's essentially the idea is you're solving problems with like repeatability, right? So where someone on your team on the DevOps side, say, spins up some infrastructure and then it's broken for some reason and no one can quite tell why. And it's probably buried deeply in some config somewhere that something wasn't set up quite right. And so the idea, ideally, with infrastructure as code is that first of all, you can declare what the infrastructure should look like. Second, you can test it before you deploy, because especially in a cloud environment, you can spin everything up and then tear it down again. And then if something is badly broken, you can actually just do a rebuild on it and start over. And it's meant to avoid a lot of problems that you get with state, basically. So much like we've moved more towards stateless services, it's almost like stateless infrastructure. There is a lot of state there, but you're just describing it so that it can be rebuilt from the ground up. Contrary to the old school approach of like having a Linux sysadmin who has to manage everything about that box, and something gets screwed up and you need to call the expert to come in and try to fix it. You might have some things to add to that, actually, Zach.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that infrastructure as code really does is it gives you that kind of like item potency, right? But for your infrastructure, where like you can set up your infrastructure and it's not like, oh, someone misconfigured this S3 bucket because they clicked a couple buttons in the console wrong, right? And then it's like, it kind of really helps with the whole thing of like, oh, it works on my machine, that problem, but like in the cloud environment, not just like in the local environment as well, right? And I definitely think that being able to use infrastructure as code, that's going to be a big part of the future, because that's how you describe things, and checking that stuff in, like minimizing the number of clicks that you have to do in a console and having that all be like checked in and evaluated and reviewed, right? Like those things are very important for sure. Over here?
No, I think like the one other thing I'd add is like what's kind of I think happening in like the data engineering space as well, especially at like larger companies, is like there's definitely this like specialization of like what data engineering I feel like means. Like you said, like data platform, which is kind of its own like data engineering-esque role, like it's kind of DevOps, kind of data engineering. Then you have like the role analytics engineer that's like kind of coming up too. And I think this is just like a further bifurcation of like what data engineering is for larger companies. Like at a smaller company, like you said, yeah, you're going to do all of it. There's no necessarily specialization, but like I think at a larger company, you do generally have this like, this is what you do, this is what you do. Kind of like, software engineer, it's like, okay, you've got a DevOps engineer, someone that's like SRE, someone that's like, you've kind of broken out those roles a little more.
But I think to the question, do you need to know this for data engineering? I would say at some point for sure, like it's absolutely mandatory. But the thing I would encourage you to do in the cloud is actually do things the hard way and spin things up and cause problems for yourself.
I do that all the time.
Right, because by doing this, you'll understand why this is important, and also sort of the limitations of doing it the hard manual way. So what is it? There's the old Kubernetes, the hard way that Kelsey Hightower did. And I think that was really good to go through to understand like how much of a pain in the butt this is to set up. Because once you understand this, then you understand the importance of infrastructure as code. If you take it the opposite way and you're only starting out with infrastructure as code, I think you're missing a lot of the beauty of making a lot of catastrophic mistakes. So that's what I encourage you. If you're learning, this is something I encourage, is to make a lot of mistakes.
I have a follow-up question for that.
What is your question?
Yeah. A question I have is, I work in startups, and infrastructure as code sounds amazing, but that's a lot of like heavy investment early on, especially when startups are like trying to move as quickly as possible. When do you feel is like the right time to actually start diving in as a company to do infrastructure as code? Should that just be like the foundation? Should that be some like a step tiered where like, all right, we reached this threshold, we should start moving our code base to this direction?
I mean, we work with a lot of startups, and I'd say a lot of them have the intention of doing infrastructure as code from day one. I actually think that it gets in the way of moving fast. So I think where on the spectrum do you want to lie between moving fast and technical debt? So if you want to incur no technical debt, you're also going to move really slow at the start. And I think if you're a startup, you don't have a lot of time on your side, so I would actually encourage you to maybe do that at some point in time, but not immediately. So it's sort of like finding the furniture for the house you haven't built yet. like, so anyone else?
You haven't lived until you've manually set up service accounts and named them all wrong in your buckets, and then you're like, why doesn't any of this work? Been there, done that. And you can still do it without getting hit with a massive GCP or AWS bill. So that's the beauty of it.
Nice. Well, thank you. I forget who wrote that in, but Josh Smith, thank you for that question. In the chat, I see a lot of requests. Josh, they really are interested in what music is coming out next. What music is coming out next? Yeah, you don't have to actually sing, but we're.
I've got some really bad news. I didn't bring my ukulele.
Oh no!
Turns out we have one right here.
We'll try and.
It didn't dawn on me that I should bring it. Next time.
Of course. Well, in a future meetup, I think it'd be cool.
Ukulele song.
No, but the beauty is when Josh actually plays it. It's I obviously love ukulele from hearing it quite frequently on the island, but we're gonna bring a special Learn Media ukulele in the future. Just
Maybe there's a music store nearby.
we'll check it out. We also got some questions about where some people are. So Shashank Kalanathi is on the way here. He'll be in the live stream tomorrow. Luke Barus is coming in as well. He'll be on the live stream tomorrow. So definitely stay tuned for that. We'll be talking a little bit about web data there as well, which is a little bit of a different theme from today with more of the tools and technologies. There was a question actually specifically for you, Zach. They love your LinkedIn. But they want to know, it's Ibrahim, a longtime follower of the channel, how do you combine being very successful in your domain and personal life? Or is the hardship around that a myth?
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a great question. I mean, I think it definitely, it kind of goes, it ebbs and flows for me sometimes, right? Where like, there's going to be weeks where like things are really stressful, and sometimes it definitely feels like, man, is this worth it, right? That's can definitely happen. But like, I think the key things there are around like building habits that increase your capacity, right? Increase your capacity both for creativity, for stress management. Like for me, big things there are, going to bed at a reasonable hour, like running. I run almost every day. That's like another one that like just really helps with like stress management, and being able to have that like kind of stress management and stuff in place is what makes it possible to like do more, right? And so that you don't feel like you need to just like, kind of retreat and not be creative, but be able to put yourself out there more and, keep talking and keep, creating. I think that's like probably the big one. And I think another one is just like, finding a room of like-minded people, just like this amazing live stream. Because like being around people that inspire you, right? And being around people who like, because you're the average of your five closest friends, right? So that's surrounding yourself by the people who you want to be like. That's the other really critical thing, for sure.
Awesome. I love that. I think something that was surprising to me is that when you start doing one thing in your life well, a lot of the times other things can follow, particularly for me is health related. So if I get into a really good exercise routine, then that sets the stage for me to eat better, which sets the stage for me to sit down and do more focused work, which sets the stage for a lot of these things. The problem is when you fall out of that, it can kind of spiral, and it's about creating the habits like you described to stay consistent in that sort of mindset in that space.
Yeah, because the spirals can go both directions, right? Because they can like you can mess up, and like just like you were saying, that there's like virtuous cycles and downward cycles, right? And they can go both directions, and like and that's where the discipline and building out those habits is very important.
Awesome. Anyone have anything to add to that one?
So something else that I think is important to recognize, and I think a lot of our engineers in the room will appreciate this, sometimes things will go wrong. They'll go badly. Sometimes you get code that's pushed to production. And sometimes same with like your habits and your rituals and routine. And I think part of it is giving yourself grace, and also strategies for how to like roll back some of those issues or recover from like failures. I know for a lot of people during like quarantine last 2-3 years, it was like it had a massive impact on people's like health, wellness, on their routines, on even like the plans and expectations. Like I had fully intended to go to Italy, and that just was not going to happen, and that's okay. Also, I developed like sleep issues and like eating issues and working out issues. So, I think a huge part of like sometimes like when you see like content out there or what have you, or even the myth of like the 10x or the 100x engineer, it's really tempting to look at that and go like, oh, like that is like they are successful because they are perfect. And sometimes it's like they're not successful because they're perfect. They are successful because they have learned how to deal with imperfection and do it in a way that is like really, graceful and also, allows them to just kind of keep on recovering because life will constantly come at you hard. So, that's kind of the only thing I would sort of add to that.
There's time. Yeah. I think one key thing that's just been ringing in my ear for the past year is less is more. It seems like you're doing a lot where you have a job, where you're doing content as well, and you can easily burn yourself out. And the name of the game is just maintenance. How can you maintain your same approach day in and day out? And it's not like these massive sprints, but it's actually these small increments that really get you to your goal, whether it's your career, your personal life. And for me, I just had this habit for years where I would just burn out every 3 months. I would go so hard, then burn out, go so hard, then burn out. And I found that I was just miserable because I was trying to do too much. Recently, I've just been, let me just do way less. Let me go take stock of like how I'm feeling, what's giving me the most energy, what's not, and let me just cut that all out and be okay with the fact that I'm not going as fast as I want to. And in reality, I have way more time than I think, and many of the deadlines I put on myself are self-imposed. And that's anxiety-inducing for me personally. And so when I started doing way less, I started being way more consistent, and I started seeing way more results. And so giving yourself permission to cut things out and do what you truly enjoy, it's been a game changer for me because I've found that I'm doing less but getting more out of it, and that's a win-win.
Also, actually, Alex, I'm really interested in your thoughts on this. I mean, you have a wonderful family. Mm-hmm. You work a full-time job. You're also producing a lot of content. Again, outside looking in, it's like unbelievably impressive. And I selfishly want to know what goes on under the hood.
That's a good question. For people who don't know, I'm married. I have 3 kids. I have my full-time job.
And a
I
farm.
do my YouTube.
I
have many
4
animals. Like it is nuts at my house. Like I joke like I never have a minute to myself. I haven't for the past probably like 3 or 4 years. Especially with YouTube kind of becoming a big part of that is there's a lot of content I want and have to create in order to keep up. But I love doing it. Part of keeping track of everything is just, I'll take a step back. Something I've realized is that my time is extremely limited. Back when I had all the time in the world, back before I was married and kids, like I felt like I was like I had 10 hours a day, but I did nothing. And now that I have almost no time, I realize how valuable it is. So now that I know how valuable my time is, and I realize like I need to make the most of every minute, I just really been focusing on, kind of compartmentalizing. I'm like, this is time spent with my family. This is family time. I'm not going to go on Twitter or LinkedIn and post. This is work time. It's time to work. This is YouTube time. I need to make my content. Like I have to kind of separate it. Otherwise, I can ruin other areas. And it has happened before where I've been like trying to do LinkedIn, but also eat breakfast with my kids, and they don't like that. And so like I've had to learn over the years, like I just need to separate things out, really focus in on what I'm doing at that moment, and make the most of that time, because maybe I only have an hour to make a video, and then I have to like go do something else or go work or do something. Like I only have that amount of time. So it's been a lot of learning over the past couple of years, but it's that's kind of like where I've landed with it.
Amazing. There's also a ton of love in the chat for both of our established authors over here who actually happen to be sitting together. Yes. So obviously fundamentals of data engineering. We have an illustrated guide to statistics over here. So if you haven't seen those, definitely check out those books. Again, Josh Starmer, Joe Reese, Matt over here. Incredible stuff. Woo-hoo. Yeah. I'm about halfway through one of the books, and then I have to get my copy of and we'll get through that. A question came in which I think is interesting that varies tremendously by company. But Hannah here is interested in how often web developers work with data analysts. Again, that probably varies tremendously, but is there some maybe rule of thumb or some wisdom that people might want to impart to her?
Well, I'll answer really quickly. I know nothing about that because I don't work with web developers at all. But I work in the data analytics space. But does anybody know? Here we go.
I have some experience with it as well.
Yeah, so I think that one of the big things that web developers can do when, at least maybe not working with data analysts, but with data engineers, is coming up with the like funnel logging. Because a lot of times on the front end, when you're like clicking through things like, oh, did they get the email? They got the email. Okay, did they click on the thing? Oh, did they fill out the form? Did they actually register? There's like steps along the funnel pathway of converting a customer into a paying customer or into them creating an account or whatever you're trying to get the customer to do. There's like steps in the funnel to do that. And like getting the logging right there is so important. And I've seen that mistake happen like even in big tech. I've seen them make those logging mistakes. And then if you don't do the logging right, then the data engineering part is very painful, and the SQL you have to write is not fun. And that's where, and I really think that's where there's a good opportunity for web developers and data people to collaborate, is on that like getting logging right.
So I've kind of like an outside looking in perspective. When I was an intern at Norfolk Southern, they outsourced a team to create an app that would help with like crosstown traffic within the railroad, where you would put like intermodal containers over onto the other railroad because Norfolk Southern doesn't handle the West Coast. And their point of contact was the data analyst team over there. And they would do a lot in regards to when they sent me out to Chicago, I think it was. And that was like the rollout of the application that they built in order to kind of streamline the process over there. And the data analysts, when they were working with it, were the people that were just like, that was their focus the entire week of that rollout. No clue about anywhere else. When I worked software engineering, I didn't work with data analysts. I worked with a 3-person team, so we didn't really have that access. But wait, hold on. Let me step back, because I became part of a different team that was actually working with Norfolk Southern as well. That's what I did as a software engineer. And we worked loosely with the data analysts there. So I guess it just varies from project to project, company to company, like Ken was saying.
I was going to talk about logs, but Zach covered that pretty well.
So at least at MailChimp, our data scientists will like interface with the front end team. They're usually like part of like a product squad, and a huge part of it is because sometimes, you know, the product, ideally, like the product should be fully designed and prototyped and all that before it gets deployed as a live service. But that's not always the case. Or even sometimes too, for example, the front end team, they want to like change the way the predictions are laid out, how they're being consumed by the customers. So our data scientists are definitely like part of like a triangle of peeps, like when we deploy our models, to just like really make sure that, hey, like we still have this connection. The monitoring and like logging is super important, but also too, like, is this prediction from the model, and even too for our internal like finance teams, for example, where we do like models that are just for MailChimp like usage period, is this like fully, is this fully like giving the value that we want out of the model, like through the predictions that are being listed? So I know those two definitely have a tight relationship there.
I actually just quickly thought of a use case actually from my work where for my job, my main role is interacting between engineering and data science, being a bridge between the two. And one thing I found is that, you know, engineers, they're not data people. They are data people, but they're not thinking about like the statistics or like what other type of analytics, that's not their domain. You're hired for data as a data analyst for that. And many times when I ask for logs, it's not very clear to them why I'm asking. And so there has to be a lot of education component as well. And so one time in particular, trying not to give too many details, but I was talking to the engineer and he was like, hey, why do we need these two separate logs? They seem like duplicates. One of them was, when you go to the page, I want to know if they clicked or not clicked or went back. And it seems like duplicate to the engineer, but when I explained, hey, knowing how they go through the product for this new feature what are their actions and like who's coming back, who's not. That's really important. And it may seem like a duplicate on the surface, but when we do our analytics, it creates two different scenarios for us. And so being very clear about how this ties to analytics. And the way I always like to frame it for them is like, hey, you're working on this project. If you get the data right for me, I'll make some really cool analytics to make your project look really cool. And from there, I typically get some pretty good buy-in from that.
I just want to touch on one thing that we're seeing a lot in our consultancy, which is embedded analytics. I would say most of the analytics use cases we're seeing now are actually user-facing analytics, not internal BI. And so this is one of these things where devs and data scientists or analysts, I think, are going to be collaborating a lot more closely. So, I mean, yeah.
Just one follow-on to what Zach was saying about logging, too. I think one of the major problems right now in the whole web tech industry is just poor collaboration between kind of the software side and the analytics side. And so it's not just like front end, but it's back end. It's everything where these schemas are built with no consideration of what's going to happen with the data downstream, right? And a lot of this is just a communication problem to like open the door of communication and say, all right, we know that not only is this software a product, but the data it generates is a product as well. And so we need to start these conversations early and work together on schema changes so that data can flow very organically from the app into whatever applications or analytics applications we have. And then, like Joe said, back into embedded, which increasingly we're seeing.
Well, right? I mean, it's something that Matt and I call the live data stack. It's just, real time, everything else. The feedback loops are getting tighter and tighter between applications and data use cases. I think in our estimation, the divide between data and software is actually going to go away at some point. It's a very much artificial distinction because they're becoming more intertwined, not less. So.
And you can read all about that in his new book.
And you can read all about it, yes. Available on Amazon.com.
I want to take a moment to just thank a lot of the people in the chat, particularly Harpreet. I know he wanted to be here. He couldn't make it this time around. Shashank is contributing a lot here. He's actually going to be here. Someone mentioned Keith Galley, who is going to come in later today as well. And Al Bellamy, who's been a constant supporter and always adding value to these conversations here. And there has been a couple donations as well from Harpreet and I think it's Auntie Rask. Those all contribute to some good cause somewhere. If we get enough, maybe I'll buy copies of books and send them out.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
Along those lines.
Harpreet contributed half a chapter of
So I see, someone asked here, they're coming from a management background and wanting to break into data science. They're asking if it's tough to break in from that, but I'm more interested in if people, like, how someone would approach that, or like how would you leverage that? How would you tell a good story to break into maybe a more individual contributor position? If anyone has thoughts.
Since I have a mic and since I've done all these positions, I'll probably answer. I think it's actually pretty cool if you're coming from management and into IC. I think that's not common, but I definitely applaud you for doing that. I think that's pretty cool. I'd be curious about the reasons for wanting to do that. Because I think we were talking about this last night. It's interesting. I think I see a lot of people who are in management positions that would be far better being ICs, and that's just kind of how it is. And so advice to get into it, I would say leverage your domain expertise. If you're trying to get into a field that's, I would hope it's in the same field that you're going into for data science. It'll make it a lot easier. The domain expertise is typically harder to get, I would say, than the, quote, data science skills. Like, that stuff can be taught, but domain expertise and knowing the business, and more importantly, knowing what business stakeholders want, that's something that you learn in the School of Hard Knocks. And so if you already are coming from that perspective and can apply that to data science, I'd say you're well on your way. Now you just got to prove you can be a data scientist, but I'm sure there's other people here who have courses that can teach you how to become a data scientist. I am not qualified for this, so.
Alex's breakdown last night of the pros and cons.
Here you go.
All right, I wasn't gonna say anything. Mickey's making me, so I'm gonna say something. And I'm not gonna speak too much towards my job because I don't I don't want to talk too much towards my job. But there are pros and cons because right now I'm an analytics manager, so I have a team underneath me, and I used to be an individual contributor, and I went towards management, and there are definitely some pros and cons in ways that you can make that transition to an individual contributor. But for me at least, when I'm looking at it, I'm like, the pros for management, if you're going to stay in management, is that you make a higher impact, a bigger impact, but you don't get as hands-on with anything, right? So if you're a manager of like something else not related to data, you're making a bigger impact. When you go more to individual contributor, you're doing a lot more of the hands-on coding, and doing like the individual work. And so, just like he was saying just a second ago, it really depends on like, what's your reason for doing that? Are you just trying to break into data? Are you trying to, just make a career change, or are you just not fulfilled in what you're doing in management? And I completely agree with the domain knowledge. Like that is, I broke in from healthcare. I utilized my healthcare expertise of 3 years in healthcare to get into data. That's one of the biggest things that I tell people too, is just use your domain knowledge, because that is really hard to learn. You can learn SQL almost anywhere. You can learn a lot of these skills almost anywhere, but the domain knowledge. So I thought that was really good advice. But also, think about like what's motivating you to want to go towards the individual contributor, and maybe build some projects based around that, or something like that. That's what I'm thinking.
Amazing. I want to also shout out, there's a lot of questions around, how to break in to data science, data engineering, a lot of these roles, or data analytics as a beginner. A lot of the people here have incredible videos on those specific topics on their own channels. For everyone on YouTube, I'll make sure to, in the description after this is replayed, to tag all the accounts, so that you can go through and check those all out as well.
Thanks, Ken.
Yeah. Also, there have been a lot of people talking about how they've transitioned and actually just landed new roles in this domain. And a major congratulations to all of them.
That's huge.
Anyone have anything to add on that specific topic, or we have time for probably 2 more questions? Sweet. I'll jump into one more. So the question, I've lost it, but I sort of remember it, is, well, how do you tell if you're a good cultural fit at a company? That's something that I've struggled with at every company I've ever worked with. And that's why I work where I work and do the things that I do. So this is going to be informative to me as well. Fit at your company? I am the culture.
I'll just start off because I have the mic. No other reason, but I think culture plays you have to really look at yourself first, right? Because for me, a culture like a FANG company is kind of the opposite culture that I want, because I have a family, I have a YouTube, I need a very flexible job where I can do what I need to do when I need to do it. Like my job has been extremely good for me because they let me go to a dentist in the morning and I can miss meetings and I can reschedule them. They've been very flexible. So like certain cultures like that, startups and consulting, like I just could not fit into that culture given my lifestyle. So, if you're young and you have all the time in the world, I mean, that could be your thing. But seeing what's important to you and then looking at companies, you can be like, is this going to fit my lifestyle, the kind of culture, the kind of lifestyle that I want to have a year or 2 after I've been in that job? I think that's really something important. Like, again, I could not go into consulting right now. Like, I wouldn't be able to take care of my family. So it's just that culture, that type of work just wouldn't work for me. Anybody? All right, cool.
Yeah, so I had a similar, like, what I was looking for was very similar in some ways to what Alex was looking for, where I didn't want, like, a rise and grind, let's go, knock back, like, 5 or 6 beers at the end of the week after, crushing, like, 60, 70, 80 hours. That's just not my flow. So I think a lot of that you can kind of tell just from, like, asking questions. But the other part, too, that is really important to me, especially as an LGBTQ, like, Asian woman, is, like, I want to be seen as an equal partner in whatever team I'm in. Like, yes, there are certain kind of labels or groups that I fit in, but at the end of the day, like I want to show up and I want to do good engineering work. So anything that has that for me, like I will be very attracted to that. And I think one of the ways people kind of they can kind of short themselves in interviews is like not asking questions because you're concerned that the interviewer is going to take it the wrong way, when you know it's like the question you need to have answered. So I had an interview with a company where like basically I was just being gaslit. I was being like interrupted by this person who was going to be essentially like my staff and like the team lead. And I'm like, is that really the job that I want from someone who I'm going to screw up in front of all the time, and I'm going to want them to help me through that? So, I think it's really, really important. Like when you show up to interviews, like you don't have to, actually, grill your interviewers. Like seriously, grill the heck out of them, and really make sure that like if there's things that you absolutely need, like be really honest about that. So for me, I was like, there's certain things I need that I'm going to find more in like a smaller, mid-sized company, and one of those was I don't want to do a tech interview. Like I've done tons of those coding interviews. I don't feel like they adequately measure the value I bring. And so I said, you know what, I'm not going to do it. And that was scary because a lot of what you read is like, you got to leak code, data structures and algorithms. But you know what, there's a lot of companies that like fall into that mid-sized bucket where they won't have you do that. Instead, they'll go like, okay, let's do a whiteboarding system design interview. Let's talk through your projects. Let's do some scenario solving. And I'm like, that to me is very, very important because I can Google search like, I don't know, shortcuts or commands or like, how do you do that like one thing with like pandas or Dask or whatever. But in terms of like how to think about that was what I needed the team to like want from me. And the beautiful part was I ended up being on a team of like all women engineers, like, for a time, which in ML ops was a little bit, considering how new the field is, was really surprising. And it's been like fantastic. So I would say find places where you're a culture add, like not a culture fit, especially if you're like, a person of color, a minority, if you're LGBTQ and all that good stuff, and like really try to find a place that, if you can, will bring out the best in you and not just like cut you like loose and go, okay, like you're done.
Well, I'm gonna ask you,
Sure.
If there's a company that's a good culture fit, let's say it's paying $150,000, then there's a not a great culture fit, but they're gonna offer you $250,000. How do you evaluate the culture versus the money? Because, if culture is super important to you, do you take like 100,000 less, or do you, what do you do?
And that's funny because that's exactly what I did. So I like in my last job search to get into an MLOps gig, for me, I said, okay, I had like a stack rank of companies that came in, and I was like, I did want and / need a job because I did sweat equity on a startup that real estate tech that maybe was not the best idea in the middle of quarantine. But even before the offers came in to myself, I said, like, I know these are the numbers I wanted. These are the numbers I gave the recruiters. And for me, I said, like, how much is it worth that difference? And I had to think about it in, like, for example, times I would need to take off. Like, how many days would I need to take off, and does PTO cover that? Further, like, educational stuff. Like, was there a wellness benefit? For me also, too, like, I was much more interested in, like, a cash offering, like, total. So even if the TC was, like, a lot of it was equity-based, I said, you know what, it's quarantine. COVID, it would be nice to have, like, a little bit cash on hand. So that was the other aspect that came in. So I had 3 offers that came in. TC was, like, definitely off, but one of them had a higher weight towards cash. And I, like, really appreciate that. But I think it just depends, right? Like, my situation is different. Like, I don't have children. I don't have a mortgage. I live in San Francisco, which is insanely expensive. So I also can't be humble. I don't want to also, short myself on money, because it's like, look, I really do need this to, like, survive in the Bay Area. There is such a thing as, like, people making 6 figures and living paycheck to paycheck in the Bay Area. I'm not necessarily one of them, but, like... that is that thing. So I think it does depend. But for me, I did make that decision. I did take the lower offer because the culture was so much better. And the fun part was the company where that interviewer was gaslighting me, and a different interviewer said, when I asked them, what are you doing to set up your candidates for success? The guy's like, yeah, you sink or swim. And I'm like, oof. And it was a tri-braid cloud environment too. So I'm like, a lot of this is not selling. And half the team that I was interested in, they ended up leaving the company like 6 months later. So like it was a fantastic choice, I think, to go for culture over just pure TC, over pure money.
I mean, it's a good point because, like you said, if you're joining that for a bad culture and you like the people, like a few people, if they don't like the culture, they might just leave. So they might not be there long either.
Yeah, I think that there's an opportunity cost even associated with like taking more money. And for example, I took about a 30% pay cut going from my last job to the one I'm currently doing. But the amount of time freedom that I get allows me to create content, allows me to start other businesses, and net, I have made significantly more money than if I just stayed in that role, which I wouldn't have been able to actually, do a lot of the content and other types of things that I enjoy doing now. And so, I mean, it's not all about money, but if you can figure out how to weight those things in your own head, like your own like Alex ranking system that is money, emotion, time agnostic. I think that that's a really powerful thing. Anyone have any additional thoughts on that?
So I think like one of the things when you're like kind of testing out culture at big companies, one of the things that's really challenging about that is like you can be like, oh, I love like Facebook's culture or Netflix's culture or whatever, but like the thing is like you really need to look at the individual team culture and really kind of like talk with the people. Who are your teammates going to be? What does on-call look like? How does your manager manage, right? What is the leadership structure look like here? Like what is the path to advancement and like all those kind of things that like, like they can't really be boiled down into like move fast and break things or like whatever, Bible tenets that like all these companies have that like that are just so big that like they have a bunch of micro cultures within the culture, right? And I think that that's an important thing to be looking at, like is really who are the 5 to 10 people who you're going to be working with the most. And do you vibe with those people? Do you think they're going to be fun to work with? Can you learn from those people? And stuff like that, because that's when I've been kind of going through my career and thinking about like where I want to go next and like how I want to make decisions and stuff like that. Like one of the biggest things for me is like is the person who I'm going to report to someone who can teach me a lot, right? And if the answer to that is no, then I'm not taking that job. Like no matter what it pays, it's not worth it. Like it's because it's all about like learning should always be one of the biggest priorities, for sure.
Well, that's the old saying, you don't leave your job, you leave your manager.
Yeah.
So,
for sure.
it's true.
Yeah. I would love to add, kind of continuing on Alex and bridging what Mikiko said. What's your current life stage? And it's going to be changing all the time. And so for me, I'm in that position where I definitely make way less working at a startup, but I have a lot of flexibility. And I became one of those people who were making 6 figures and living paycheck to paycheck. And what happened was, my wife suddenly got sick and she couldn't work anymore. And so I'm the only one working. And so I had to sit down with my wife. I was like, look, we don't have this income anymore. Do you want me to find another job where I can make more and cover that? Or do you want me to stay at my current place and find somewhere where I have a lot of flexibility to really care for you while you're going through this hard time? And we ultimately decided to make less but have me have more flexibility. And I would make that decision over and over and over again. No amount of money can really put time. No amount of money can be worth like the time with your family, especially when they need you. And now that we're kind of getting over the hump, readjust our finances so we're no longer paycheck to paycheck from that sudden loss of money. Now I'm in a different stage where now I can have different conversations with my manager. I can talk about raises. I can talk about what's my next career move, whether it's within the company or outside the company, because now my life stage changed. My wife doesn't need as much support anymore. And now I'm ready to make that grinding move to take my family to the next level.
Amazing. Anyone else? I think that's really all the time that we have for questions today. Of course, again, we're going to be doing another live stream tomorrow. It'll be around the same time, possibly around an hour later. I think it would also be useful. I 100% should have done this at the beginning, but I forgot. Maybe if, Mark, we just pass the microphone around, say who you are, say how people can, we can start with you.
Oh, okay. I was trying to go clockwise, but
how people can, learn more about you or get attached to your content. Again, as I mentioned, in maybe like 2 hours here, I'll put all of the links in the description to everyone who's been here, but this will be a shortcut for that. And hold everyone over till then.
Awesome. My name's Mark Freeman, founder of On the Mark Data. You can go to onthemarkdata.com. Mark, M-A-R-K. And the best place right now is LinkedIn. That's where I have a lot of my posts and content. I also started my YouTube recently with the Deep Note video, actually. And so I'm trying to put more content there as well. So follow me on there, and we can have a super fun data journey together. Who wants it?
Before that, I also want to thank again Deep Note for sponsoring the stream, for making this possible. Really exciting to have all of us together here. Also, Bright Data has made it possible for us to stay in this amazing house together. So major shout out to them, and major shout out to all other potential future sponsors that would like to get involved with this stuff. We can go this way, actually. Yeah, go for it. Everyone knows who I am. I hope.
All right, my name is Avery Smith. I help a lot of aspiring data professionals land their careers. I make a lot of content on LinkedIn, so you guys can find me there. I also have a YouTube, and I've been in the chat, so you guys can probably find me there as well. So.
Hi, my name is Tina. So I used to be a data scientist at Meta, and then I quit my job. So now I just do like online things. You can check me out by clicking in the when I say stuff. Like now, you can go check out my YouTube channel.
Yeah, that's right. Quit your job. Go do cool things. Play risky games. No, I'm kidding. So my name is Mikiko Baisley. I work as a senior MLOps engineer at MailChimp. You can find me on LinkedIn, YouTube. I have a Medium. I'm switching it over to Substack. And occasionally I like to yell random things at Twitter, much like, I don't know, like the secret crazy cat lady that I am that likes to carry her knitting around. So, yeah. Hope to see you guys tomorrow.
I'm Matt Housley. I'm the CTO at Ternary Data. So my co-founder is Joe Reese, and we also wrote a book together recently, as he mentioned. And so you can learn more about us and our ideas by reading Fundamentals of Data Engineering, available from O'Reilly Media. We also have a website and a weekly newsletter that comes out. You can check out a lot of our thoughts there, and a lot of content on LinkedIn as well.
And their book is #1 on Amazon, Data Engineering.
Yeah, they won't say it, but it's a bestseller.
Very nice. My name is Forrest Knight, and I quit my job to make cool things on YouTube. At least I think they're cool. I make videos about computer science and software engineering and how I finesse my way into the data science town hall. I'll never know, but I'm happy to be here regardless.
Hey, I'm Zach Wilson. I'm a staff data engineer at Airbnb. I write a lot of content on LinkedIn, and I'm also on YouTube. My channel's Data with Zach, and yeah, that's me.
Hello, I'm Josh Starmer. I have a YouTube channel called Stack West with Josh Starmer, and I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter, and I'm also lead AI educator at lightning.ai.
Bam.
Hey, what's up, Joe Reese, Web3 content producer. What's up?
Web6 content producer.
Yeah, you can check me out on. Just kidding. So I'm actually the CEO, co-founder of Ternary Data, along with Matt, recovering data scientist and co-author of Fundamentals of Data Engineering. You can find me on LinkedIn and find us on O'Reilly or Amazon, actually. Buy our damn book. Thank you.
Next to the #1 sign.
Yeah, we'll bring one as a prop tomorrow, and we have one of Josh's books as a prop as well.
Yeah,
so.
buy his book too. So.
Yeah. Hey, everyone. My name is Ben Rogerson, a.k.a. the Seattle Data Guy. You can pretty much just find me under Seattle Data Guy on YouTube, Substack, LinkedIn, and just about everything else. I make content on data engineering mostly, and like a lot of other people, I quit my job at Facebook. But, we have... it's a decent enough percentage. Anyways, like Tina. So I do content, but I also do like data engineering consulting is kind of more of the main thing that I do. So, yeah, that's me. Alex.
Hey everybody, my name is Alex Freeberg. I have a YouTube channel called Alex the Analyst, where I talk about everything data analytics, how to break into the field. I do a bunch of tutorials and stuff like that. I'm also on LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn. That's kind of where I post a lot of my other content and stuff like that. Then I have an Instagram and a Twitter. And Instagram's personal, so if you want to know more about my personal life for whatever reason, you can go on there.
If you want to check out his farm.
yeah. I post my my family and like my kids and all that good stuff.
I feel like half your stories are like a duck or something like that.
Yeah, it's a lot about my dogs and like what I do day to day. It's kind of like the behind the scenes of my life.
Nothing. It's just awesome. I follow.
Yeah. Amazing. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. We had a great time. I hope you had a really good time as well. If you didn't get your questions answered, be sure to tune in tomorrow as well. We'll have plenty more time for Q&A, and we'll have another great experience then.
Thanks, Ken.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much, everyone.